After 6 months of coronavirus lockdowns, 40 million Americans have filed for unemployment, while the richest Americans have made billions. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. The coronavirus, it's affected every single person in America. Even my friend Wilson, who lives alone in a cave in Montana. He ran out of toilet paper due to the shortage. Well, eventually he found a stash in the woods. But while everyone is affected by the coronavirus in one way or another, the economic impact is being felt by some people a lot more than others. And it's going to affect the U.S. economy for a very long time. Matt Gnezda has more.
Thanks, Chris. We've been under some sort of coronavirus lockdown in the U.S. now for more than 6 months. And 6 months ago, Congress passed a stimulus bill to pump more than $2 trillion into the U.S. economy. But it turns out throwing trillions of dollars of government money at something doesn't necessarily fix all of America's problems. I know, right? And one of the biggest problems with the 6 months of lockdown restrictions is that they've changed the U.S. economy in ways that have helped the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Here are 5 ways. Number 1, big business wins, small business loses. Depending on what state you live in, the most severe part of the lockdown probably lasted a month or 2. And state governments shut down everything except so-called essential businesses. Small businesses that sold, say, clothing were shut down. Big businesses that sold clothing but also at least one so-called essential item, like food, were not shut down. Big box retailers like Walmart and Target that have small grocery sections, they've seen record profits. That's in part because they've been able to use this loophole to qualify for the technical definition of essential. And even after some lockdown restrictions have been lifted, a lot of small brick and mortar businesses don't have the cash flow to open back up again. So in many areas, consumers just don't have much choice anymore but to go to a store like Walmart to buy essential items, like poop emoji cake pans? How is this real? Another reason big box stores have done well is that they already have robust websites for online shopping with fast shipping, unlike those mom and pop poop emoji cake pan stores. Speaking of online shopping, did you know that COVID-19 has made Amazon's Jeff Bezos the richest person in history? Hey Shelly, does Amazon sell the... Yeah, there it is. The poop emoji cake pan with free one-day Prime shipping. Free one-day Prime shipping is actually one of the reasons Bezos earned $97 billion in just the last 6 months. And he's now worth more than $200 billion. Overall, billionaires have gotten $637 billion richer during the coronavirus pandemic. That's a lot of money. You know those stimulus checks that the government sent out to all of us? The total amount of those is less than half of what a tiny handful of billionaires made in that same time frame. And part of the reason for that is, number 2, uneven bailout. Remember when the stock market crashed in March and then the Federal Reserve decided to bail out Wall Street with trillions of dollars? And then I told you about it back when I had my awesome quarantine beard. Well, good news. The stock market is back. In August, U.S. stocks hit a record high. Meanwhile, 40 million Americans have filed for unemployment during the pandemic. That's too bad. But did I mention U.S. stocks hit a record high? People who had money to invest in stocks and didn't have to sell them at the low point to make ends meet, those people are now doing fine. Now, I'm not saying it's bad that the stock market is back up. I think it's good. Well, except that artificially inflating stock values with Fed bailout money means that price-to-earnings ratios are at dangerously high levels. But that's not a rabbit hole I want to go down in this episode. Anyway, When the stock market is back up, it does help the US economy, but it mainly helps people who already have more money, and not your average minimum wage worker. Which brings us to number 3, job loss. Speaking of 40 million Americans filing for unemployment, job losses have been disproportionately high among low-income people. People who work in industries where you have to be there on site, like transportation, retail, cleaning, childcare. Those are the kinds of low-paying jobs that got cut first. Meanwhile, white-collar workers have been more likely to keep their jobs and work from home over Zoom. Yes, everyone hates Zoom, but having to be on a 3-hour Zoom call every day is still better than losing your job. Slightly better. At least with Zoom, you don't have to wear pants. But you still earn enough money to keep buying pants, if you want to. Number 4, automation. Extensive lockdowns have been pushing companies towards automation faster than ever. Granted, companies have been trending in this direction for a long time. But now, companies are speeding up the automation plans they were already working on. As one expert tells Forbes, as companies have recovered their revenues and reopened their supply chains, they have increasingly invested not on rehiring the workforce, but on automation and reducing their dependence on manpower. Oh wait, what's that, Shelley? Yes, we're still on track to replace Chris with Sarcastibot 3000. I see no possible downside to this. But millions of jobs that historically have been minimum wage jobs, like working retail, are now on their way to being replaced faster than ever, like by those stupid self-checkout machines. But I put my poop emoji cake pan in the bag already! Anyway, this shift towards job automation will be permanent, and low-income people will be hit the hardest. At least until the day we're hit with what I call the un-coronavirus crisis. That's where the US electrical grid goes out and the internet stops working for 6 months. And then none of us can work from home. And then I'll do an episode about how all those poor robots are out of a job. Of course, there won't be any YouTube videos, so I'll have to do it live on the sidewalk. It's true. And number 5, closed schools. This one has a deep impact on the entire next generation of Americans. Starting in March 2020, schools across the country began to close because of the coronavirus. Even now in the fall semester, schools remain closed in several states, the ones in orange. That includes California, which has 12% of the US population. In these yellow states, schools remain partially closed, or it's different from district to district. Closed schools means kids have to stay home. Some schools have moved classes online, and that's not too bad for affluent kids who have their own room and a good computer, and one parent who can afford to stay home and supervise them, or maybe even hire a private tutor. But low-income families are less likely to have any of those resources. Kids are falling behind. Schools also act as America's daytime babysitter. So a lot of parents, especially single parents, have had to choose between leaving their kids alone at home all day or not having a job. Guess who this hurts the most? Low-income families, which also tend to be disproportionately Black and Hispanic. But forget just the short-term headache for low-income families. What's the long-term impact of schools being closed for an entire year? Kids are going to be a year behind in their education, except, of course, for the kids in households with the resources to make the most of online stay-at-home learning. In America, K-12 education is supposed to be the great equalizer. It's never done as good a job as it should, but in 2020, the gap is just getting so much wider. And craziest of all, this is happening the most in my supposedly liberal home state of California, where the governor has shut down all the schools this fall. But don't worry, according to the LA Times, California school campuses in affluent areas plan to open quicker than those in poor Latino ones. So those are 5 ways that the coronavirus is having an impact on the US economy, helping the rich get richer and making it harder for the poor. And the impact will last even after we return to so-called normal. There's no easy solution to this, But a good start would be asking the wealthiest Americans to help out voluntarily by returning to the great tradition of public charity, the kind of charity that helps America's most needy. For example, that $97 billion that Jeff Bezos made just this year, that could pay for a year of K-12 education for 5 million low-income children. He'd be a hero. His good name would be plastered on every school, and he could deliver new teachers each morning by drone. And even after all that philanthropy, Jeff Bezos would have more than $100 billion left over, so he can still afford all the little comforts in life, like a luxury private jet or a 24-karat gold diamond-encrusted poop emoji cake pan. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Matt. And if you'd like to have more of these types of episodes, support America Uncovered on the crowdfunding website Patreon. With as little as $1 or more per episode, you're helping us keep making the show, even during the coronavirus. Go to patreon.com/America Uncovered to learn more. And that's it for this episode of America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.